So the most important thing to remember is there is never just behaviour. You cannot change behaviour unless you look at the bit before and the bit afterwards. That's the first step in being able to take this from the textbooks and putting it into the real world. And a complex behaviour is just lots of little bits, lots of little ABC units. So when we look at a complex behaviour, we have to understand how to break it down before we can build it up. So all complex behaviours are behaviours made up of many ABC units. All behaviour or complex behaviour is just lots of little behaviours. Whatever you want to train, you first need a way to cause the animal to behave. You need a goal behaviour. We've talked about that already. And a way to reinforce the behaviour, because it's only through reinforcement that behaviour grows. You also, of course, need a way to communicate to the animal what behaviour gained the reinforcement. So the real question, first and foremost, is no matter what my goal is, how do I break this behaviour down into learnable bits? If I've got a behaviour I don't want, what do I want, and how do I build that up in the situation that at the moment the unwanted behaviour happens? So let's take a look at something and see if we can help with an example. So here is a little bit of scent work. In scent work, the dog has to be cued to go out there, find the source of the odour and perform some kind of alert behaviour to the handler that they have found source odour. Now, a way to think about this, just before we watch this and start to break it down a little bit, we'll see one way that we can break it down, is that when you say to the dog, go find the source odour and perform a trained behaviour to tell me that you found it and where it is, basically what we're saying to the dog is go find the cue to your trained behaviour. And it just happens to be a smell. And they have to get as close to the smell's origin as possible. So let's watch this little tiny video. Oops, sorry, my mistake. So the odour's on that pole there, and in this training session I'm working on Quinn confirming staying at source, what we call odour obedient. Come back. So his alert behaviour is simply to hold steady there, put his nose onto the source and hold steady there. And when we look at that, it kind of looks pretty simple, and that's just one tiny bit of a search that could be searching for multiple odours. But here's just a graphic of a way that I think about the complex behaviour of training up a scent work dog. So I've got the cue, which a cue is a kind of antecedent, the bit before the behaviour. So obviously we have to teach a cue. And the cue then tells the dog to go search for odour. So there's going to be some smell in the environment somewhere, and that's one behaviour. Now when he finds the odour, not the source of the odour, but when he finds the smell, to start to follow it back to the source or the point of origin, finding that is actually a reinforcer for searching for odour. And it also, that little consequence there can actually be a cue to follow, that should say follow the odour. And that's the behaviour. Follow the odour, follow it, follow it, follow it, and that leads you to source. When you find source, that's a reinforcing consequence for following the odour. And when you find source, all you need to do now is put your nose on source, That's the cue to perform whatever alert behaviour you've been trained to do. And hey presto, you gain reinforcement for your trouble, from your handler. So don't worry if you don't do scent work. Don't worry if this looks like all higgledy-piggledy. This is just the start to show you how a complex behaviour can be broken down into smaller units. ABC, cue, behaviour, reinforcement, cue, behaviour, reinforcement, and how something like this, what we call a behaviour chain, can be more easily understood when you break it down bit by bit. So here's just another example. Same dog, it's just Quinny. The odour is over here on the pot plant somewhere, so I say to him, ready, go find it. That's my cue, go find it. Now he's searching for odour. He's going, where is it? He hits it, he follows it, he pinpoints it, he looks back at me, that's his alert behaviour, and part of his alert behaviour is to stay there until I give him the feedback. Good job, good job. And there's lots of different ways to do this. This is just the way that I do it, and I'm using these little graphics to show you the bits that make up that whole behaviour. So you've got to be able to think about behaviour in a way that you can break it down into bits, trainable bits. And those bits are always will contain, obviously, your target behaviour, but a cue and a reinforcer as well. So each bit can be broken down into many criteria. How many criteria? Well, I think the better you get at breaking behaviour down, the more criteria you find. And to me, that's a trainable bit. I want to get to a place, no matter how complex the overall behaviour or behaviour chain looks, I want to get down into a bit that I can communicate yes or no, or right or wrong. And that's a really trainable bit. And I have to tell you that this is the most badly done part of dog training. We generally tend to lump and ask the dog or try and train the dog to do multiple parts or multiple criteria at once. Because oftentimes when you're training tiny bits, it kind of feels like you're training nothing. But let me tell you, and no, let me show you, it all comes together in the end. And good training, any good training, is good communication. So that's what you are doing when you are training. You are communicating for your dog. I want this, I don't want that. And for me, for the most part, I communicate I don't want that by not delivering reinforcement. If I get into a situation where I'm a bit confused, should I reinforce that or should I couldn't? That's a clear sign to me that I have not broken it down enough, or I've not trained the parts enough and I've got to break it down a bit more. So we're going to just look at a series of videos of my new puppy, who's still a puppy, but he's growing every day, and understand how I have begun to train his alert behaviour. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, the first thing I'll say to you to do, the most important thing you can do when you've got a behaviour that you want to train up is write down your criteria. What exactly in a describable language do you want the dog to do? And in that purple circle there, let's read it. On pinpointing source, Robin will get his nose as close to source as possible, then sit and stare in the direction of source, no matter where I am or what I am doing. He's going to hold that position until he is released. So that's my criteria. I've got my target behaviour. I've got some information about the context there. No matter where I am, no matter where I'm doing. Did you get trodden on, Fly? He's got to pinpoint the source. All of that is the context. And my target behaviour is very well described there. Now what I've got is a way to break that alert behaviour down, good boy, into easily trainable and communicatable bits or aspects of that behaviour. So here's another one. So again, in the purple section, I've got my criteria, which we just read, and then each of these little bubbles, I've drawn out different parts of my criteria. So some of the things, or one of the things I have to work on is his nose on source. And then I've written ways that I've done that, or I do it just, I've brainstormed. I want the sit and I want the stare, but they're two separate parts. I'm not going to put them together at first, and you're going to see I do training sessions where I focus on the sit and training sessions when I focus on the stare. Sometimes I reinforce the stare when there is no sit, and sometimes I reinforce the sit when he's not staring. The direction, he's got to face the source odour, and you're going to see I don't start off with an odour, I start off with a visual stimulus because I can't perceive source odour. I'm kind of useless in the nose division, right? My behaviour I'm going to change up, and then the release cue. So let's have a look at this in real training. This has been going on for the past 5 weeks or so. So the first thing I did is say there will be a thing that is valuable. We're going to make the thing a lid that I can see, and there's some food there, so that brings his attention right in there.
Good.
So you can see already he's starting to have a little freeze. Wait for that. There's no sit.
Steady, go.
Going to get him away while I just get my brain back into gear.
Good. Oopsies.
See that stuff up there? My timing was bad. Doesn't matter.
Steady, go.
Throwing away so that just gives me a bit more time to think because I didn't like that rep. Taking my hand off now, so
Good.
he keeps still, so I like that. I think I've got another dog out there. That's probably why I threw a bit there.
Ready?
I always work my dogs and expect them to be able to work with the food close by. So Robin's just learning that there'll never be
Good boy. Lovely.
there'll never be food for him out of that bowl. But I need it accessible to myself, so that just lifting up punished the behaviour of coming over to the bowl.
Good boy. Lovely. Ready, go.
We'll do one more. We don't need to watch all of this. Oh, now I don't want any of that stuff. So I've just changed it up there where the food's come in. Oh, and there was food under Tufa.
Go. Good boy.
Good old Spaz.
Good.
You can see these aren't perfect, but can you see it's just one thing. Just be there
Good.
and basically don't interact with that thing, because I don't want him to learn that digging and
Good.
biting at that is going to work. And that's part of my duration, right? So at the moment my bridge and lifting up is the end of the behaviour.
Good.
So I did a lot of that. Now, look at how I've set up my antecedent or my environment to get the sit.
Ready.
I'm playing exactly the same game, but now I've got it at nose level so that it's easier for him to go into that position. Whoopsies. So that's what I don't want, so I take it away. He goes, hey, what happened? We're still learning that. So I used to lure him around.
Good boy.
Food.
Good.
So same game, just a different setup. Not doing as many throwouts, so being in that position is really getting a lot of the reward or the information. Sitting is good. And remember, coming in and sitting, moving in and sitting is harder than staying and sitting, right? So I'm helping him.
Good. Good.
Yep, that's it.
Good. Good. Good.
Okay. So now I'm just changing that's pretty much the same setup, and now I'm just changing the fact that there's no food under now that the food comes in. Because there won't be food under there all said and done. Now that doesn't mean that sometimes I'm not going to put food back under the lid at some point in his training. These are all my foundation behaviours to build the behaviour up. And by training each of these individually, not only do I get a fantastic opportunity to see them all blend together, but I also have an opportunity then to go back and play any one of these little games or exercises if I see a part of my criteria when he's up and he's trialing, you know, when he's big boy, if I see one of those weakening. Strengthen them up nice and easily. So what I'm trying to show you is that criteria, which is a very complex sit and stare and wait and all of that, we train it bit by bit. Oh, look, I've pulled out bread. Where the hell did I get that? I don't remember that. How funny is that? Didn't realise. Now this is where I was being a bit tricky, and really it's a bit hard. But you know, no training session is ever perfect, so I just make it easier. Good job. Nice lot of reinforcement history there for holding position.
Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Ready, go.
Oopsies.
Good.
Lovely. Okay, so that goes on for a bit more. Now, my nose on source had started to weaken off a bit because I'd been focusing on the sit. That happens when you focus on one criteria, but it doesn't matter because over the course of the weeks and the months and eventually the years of training, there's going to be lots of reinforcement history in each of these criteria, so they'll all come together. So there's my lid. And this way I'm focusing on nose on source. So I don't care if he sits this time. So it's not a linear progression, and you can see I've taken it back onto the ground so that he's more likely to come up and put his nose on source. Good job. And also you see the variety of ways that I reinforce him. Sometimes I throw it, sometimes it's under the lid, sometimes I hand it in, sometimes I throw one bit, sometimes I throw several bits. You can see I'm moving myself around already because I don't want that to be a consistent picture where he's always coming into me or he's always staying on the side, because guess what? Then it will be important to him. What's consistent is the lid. Oh, sorry about the swear word. So again, this is me just focusing on my position, doesn't matter, even though I naturally did that before. This is quite funny actually. Huh? Just has not seen it. It's not thinking about it. What? I've moved away. So he's like, what are we doing here? And he gets a smell of it. And this was really interesting because he can see it. He doesn't need to use his nose. But what I'm not showing you is the work that I'm doing on his hunting. And he's doing a lot of hunting and sniffing out food and toys in this environment, in my training area, otherwise known as a garage. So naturally his nose starts to work. It's hard, isn't it? And really, I think I'm asking, now watching this back, it's great. I think I'm asking a little bit too much here. Okay, so there's that. And then, look, we're just starting to take it out on the round. So he's seen me. Oh, yes, I'm going to do this now, actually.
Wait, might put it here somewhere. Might put it there somewhere.
So I put it down
Steady.
in one of those things.
Go.
You can see he's really starting to learn his cue there as well. This is really starting to look like a dog that's using his nose to search, because it is. He finds it and he expects me to throw him food. Huge criteria raise, right? So I don't give a turd that he doesn't sit. The fact that he found it and showed me through a behaviour change that it was coming in, that he knew it was coming in, is fine by me. So again, this is obviously at Dog Club. Very thrilled that he can hold there and stay there and focus on that with all of this stuff going on. This is so cool for me. So good. So I just move it a little bit. I don't care that he's using his eyes. I don't care. Because he's, look at this environment. I think I've got one more here. Oh, yep, and I'll change my position. I think that's what I do. Oh no, it must be the next one. So now he's using his nose. Pretty good.
There you go.
He didn't sit, he didn't nose to source, but I still pay it because there's so much great stuff there, right? So I'm just saying this works everywhere, but my criteria here is loose. You don't need to see that one. Let's just go to this one, because what's really important is that the lid is the stimulus, is the cue. And the lid is playing the role of source odor today, right? So this is just a setup that I made so that I could easily say or have him show me that I'm dropping it all over the place, that the lid is important. So I'm going to do a couple of reps when the lid is there. Oopsies.
Go down here. Like a real ripper. Excellent.
Oh, that stupid thing got... I forgot about that. Anyway, I might put the link in later for that one for you. So bottom line is this one, we're just going a little bit longer than the 15 minutes, 23, but this one is important. Breaking behaviour down into trainable bits is vital. Now, when we first learn about this, we really learn about it in a step situation. Like you can see over there, we say, okay, build the first criteria up and then the next one and get it, you might have heard people say get it to 80% and then relax that criteria. And that's a very linear way. And sometimes we are going to have some criteria, certain criteria built before we add on others. But with my alert behaviour and many, many other behaviours, we don't need to have one before the other. So what we can actually do is we can work on all of them, not at the same time in the sense of in the same training session, although we kind of can, but we can do one training session when we're focusing on sit, one training session when we're focusing on nose on source, one when we're focusing on duration, one where we're focusing on where I am in space or time and distance and duration and all of the various criteria. So it's just a different way to think about building behaviour up. And like I said, it's one of the things that people, I reckon that is the main reason people find behaviour doesn't grow as quickly as they would like it to, is because they've made it too confusing, both for themselves and for the dog. So just by way of an example, here is a situation where obviously where the goal behaviour is for the bird to place the ball in the cup. Obviously I had to get him comfortable sitting on the cup. Obviously, before I introduced the ball in, obviously I had to get him comfortable touching and just carrying and picking up the ball before I asked him to sit on the bowl and handle it. So it's just an example of we needed to have those behaviours separate before we could put them together. Okay? And just quickly, because it's a bit of a fun one.
Yay.
So there's seed in that silver bowl.
Yay. Got to be careful with it, silly. Better. Yes, good bird.
Good bird indeed. So just remember that anytime in your training that you see failure or you feel failure or it's not going the way that you want it, the probability is that you've just asked too much too soon. And the best thing you can do is put the dog out the back or bring the dog in, make yourself a cuppa, sit down and try and work out how you can break what you're trying to do down just that little bit more so that you can communicate nice and clearly.